This is Chris from End Times Matrix News, and unfortunately, Tim could not be here today as he is on another mission. But I do have Anthony Patch back today to discuss CERN and the tearing of the veil. Hey, Anthony, how are you doing?
Great, Chris. Thank you. I love talking with you. I missed Tim, but thanks for the invite. This is kind of a surprise conversation we're having today.
Well, thanks for joining me to discuss this very important topic about CERN tearing the veil, of course. I think everybody knows by now that you have 20 plus years in researching CERN. Our goal here today is actually to reveal things as followers of Jesus Christ, to tell the truth as he would have us do, to wake people up to the truth regarding CERN, which is a New World Order mark of the beast machine that can tear the veil whenever they're ready. On our last show, you said CERN was ready to tear the veil when they're ready, and I just wanted you to come back and talk about that and explain again what is a Satan particle and how it exactly will open the veil.
Well, yeah, we'll try to keep it simple, but this revolves around, I sort of call it my favorite topic besides CERN, as a part of CERN, the good old strangelets, the quark gluon condensate. And many people that have heard our conversations, they might be saying, oh boy, here we go again. Why are we always talking about strangelets? Well, the thing that's kind of funny is the mainstream media, the popular media, they don't talk about strangelets. And even in the scientific papers, they avoid using the word strangelets. They'll talk about quark gluon condensates. And as you mentioned, now they're talking about pentaquarks, which are quarks arranged in a pentagram, hence the name, or 5 quarks arranged in a pattern. But they don't want to say strange because that sounds like black holes. It sounds very scary. So everybody tries to avoid it. But we bring it right out in the open and we talk about strangelets because this is a weapon. And CERN is a weapons program.
You mentioned that this was the most powerful weapon in the world. And nuclear warheads are firecrackers compared to this most powerful Satan particle.
They really are. And it's not just hyperbole on my part to say that. This comes right from renowned scientists that are very concerned about what is going on with the Large Hadron Collider. Just to update, right now they're not colliding particles. Later on this year they will, but they wrapped up last year by colliding ions of lead. And when you're colliding at high energy levels, you're creating strangelets. So this is the most powerful explosive in the known universe. This is the material that was formed right after the singularity of the Big Bang exploded. And in the timeline of the Big Bang, it predates, it comes before the so-called God particle, the Higgs boson. So this fits in between the start and then the formation of the Higgs boson. And this is what they're producing. And they've been producing in 2013 and all of last year, even with the collision of protons and lead, and then later on lead and lead being collided. All of those resulted in strangelets being produced. The thing that is scary is that it has some other characteristics. It is a weapons program, as I said. Strangelets will be used as weapons, and we're going to go into that in terms of tearing the veil, the breaking of, through to another dimension. But they also have the affinity to, as a stable material. It sounds like an explosive material, and then I say that it's stable. In quantum physics, they're considered, due to their charge state, due to their spin, they are considered stable material. Everything else in our everyday existence that we interact with is considered unstable. Because strangelets are stable, they attract all other matter to them. If you think of the theoretical, and I stress theoretical, black hole, the mechanism of that has been described as gravity, which is also theoretical. It attracts, much like a black hole scenario, matter to itself. Also, it is so dense that strangelets cannot be contained. And they, if you will, fall from their point of creation, from the Large Hadron Collider to the center of the Earth, to the core. Once they reach the core, they then begin to attract matter to themselves. This is the mechanism that creates a neutron star. This effectively, depending on the amount of strangelet material that's been created and resides at the core, determines the rate of conversion of the iron core of the Earth into a strange star, into a neutron star. This happens in the cosmos all the time. So there are some real dangers associated with what is going on with the LHC, and this has been presented by many leading scientists, exactly that scenario of the conversion of the Earth to a neutron star.
Scientists explain in their own terms the cosmic egg is the Big Bang. The recreation of the Big Bang is the cosmic egg. I've researched the cosmic egg of the Ogot of the ancients being around 2600 BC. Now, if something like this happened before, of course, I wouldn't know what date that was because I know that this only represents after the flood. And we know that Satan fell before then. And we talked about how the particle has what the planets are made of, lead and the iron and the muons represented Venus and the phosphorus, because the quantum computer can put live elements in the machine. The quantum computer is tied to CERN.
That's
the
correct.
Was birthed from. The internet was birthed from CERN. Everything technical, Wi-Fi, comes from CERN. That's where everything that was technical was birthed from. It's an alchemy machine, basically. I mean, everything that they're doing, like you explained with the isotopes from these particles with alchemy and like the Thunderbolts project, like the birthing of the Ogot, the Antichrist, through Saturn and Venus and Mars.
That's correct. What we're going to get into that's new material, and I haven't shared this with other people in other conversations, and we've not discussed this before, is the definitive explanation, as best as I can do it and keep it simple so that people can wrap their heads around it. But we're going to talk about the actual mechanism that we've alluded to in past conversations about the tearing of the veil, of the breaking through to another dimension. How does that actually happen from a physics standpoint? So we're going to get into that, but we wanted to lay the foundation of revisiting strangelets and what they are, as well as what are the elementary particles, the elements of the universe, and how does that play into this? Because, the egg is the birth. The Big Bang is the birth of the universe, as far as we can tell in our measurements of what's called redshift and Doppler redshift effects, and we can measure the fact that the universe is rapidly expanding. So we're just building upon that foundation of the discussion, and now we can go into talking about the ripping of the veil or the rending of the veil, much like happened with the temple.
What about quantum tunneling? I know Tim wanted me to ask you that. How does quantum tunneling play into all of this?
Quantum tunneling, it means essentially that you are moving a signal. I'll get into more detail, but you're moving a signal from one dimension to another dimension. You're moving from one quantum state through a barrier, an energy barrier, to another quantum state. So the way that I would ask people to picture this is related to how the quantum computer made by D-Wave Corporation, called the adiabatic quantum computer, that means without heat transfer. You'll even find this at their website. They have a graph in which they show, essentially, you might call it a mountain. It's a peak. At the bottom, it has a wide base, and it goes up to a fine point at the peak. So you have basically a pyramid. And on one side of this base, you have a digital signal. In this case, it's what's called a combinatorial program, a digital program that sends an electric signal through the base of this pyramid. That pyramid is an energy barrier, which represents a dimension, a dimensional barrier. It sends the signal through the base of that pyramid to the other side. So it pierces through, it tunnels through that energy barrier. Now, the reason that I say that it goes through the base and call it quantum tunneling, which is the accurate word, it's not my word, is that it is a shorter route to the other side of the energy barrier, to the other dimension. instead of climbing all the way up one side of the mountain or the pyramid, over the peak and back down the other side to the other dimension, which requires tremendous amounts of energy and takes a lot more time in terms of quantum scale time. The shortcut is to tunnel right through the base. Now, if we scale that up, there is the dynamic, there is the scenario in which the strangelets we talked about come into play. That's a graphical representation of a process that takes place, as I said, without heat, adiabatic, without a heat transfer, which means that they are able to maintain stable coherence of a signal. In computer programming and in computer operation, the worst thing that can happen is a loss of coherence, because then that brings in errors to your computational process. If you can maintain coherence, a steady state signal in a computer, then your ability to achieve a near perfect, near defect-free solution to a problem can be achieved. So they have a computer that operates in a super cold state, superconductive, not using any heat transfer, and it's shielded by a box. It's shielded from outside electromagnetic interference, like microwaves and radio signals. And the point here is we are going to make the leap from the quantum computer to the Large Hadron Collider and the opening of the portal, because the two mechanisms only vary in scale. The processes are nearly identical. That's why I give you the graphical representation of a pyramid or a sharp-peaked mountain to describe the process of quantum tunneling, because quantum tunneling is going to scale up and be used in my explanation of how the LHC is going to open the portal.
What is your opinion on when they get ready to tear the veil? I know that you said that they've done their proof of concept. They can tear the veil whenever they're ready. So what do you think when they tear the veil? Like, how long will the veil open? How is the Birkeland currents going to be connected at that point? How is the plasma field going to envelope? How does all of that actually look like?
The time in which the portal is open, the time in which the Birkeland currents are connected to Saturn, will be very short. I think we're looking at just a matter of just a few seconds in duration. The reason I'm kind of speaking slowly and deliberately is that it is important to understand what time is on a quantum scale. Normally in physics, when we're talking about things that are happening at the quantum scale, we're talking about things that happen almost in our frame of reference instantaneously. But you can break that down further and talk about picoseconds and nanoseconds. Those are the normal time frames in which things are transmutating in terms of changing from one element to another, for example, or when you're rearranging quarks. These are things that are happening very quickly. And the duration of stability of a quark gluon condensate typically, as I said, is only in nanoseconds, but now has moved up to stability of several minutes. In some literature, I've read that they've been able to have stable strangelets for as long as an hour. I say all of that so that people have a frame of reference. When I say a minute to 2 minutes to several minutes in which the portal is open, that's an eternity in comparison to picoseconds and nanoseconds of time. The reason that I say this is going to be a minute to several minutes in which the portal is open is because of the amount of digital information that is going to travel from one dimension into our dimension. The transmitting of digital information, people can understand if you relate it to electricity or the speed of our computers. Our computers move very quickly in terms of moving electrons and the sharing of data, the sharing of digital information. This is what I'm talking about with the portal in terms of digital information being transmitted from one side to the other through this quantum tunneling that we're going to spend a little more time talking about. So we're talking about a long duration of time when we're talking about quantum levels of time, and we're talking about, therefore, massive amounts of digital information that will be transmitted during this, let's say, eternity of time, scaling from the quantum time scale up to our time scale of several minutes, and then the portal's going to close.
So when the portal closes, are they still connected to Saturn?
No. The reason for the portal is to be able to communicate with Saturn, to the prison planet. It is to allow these entities that are in Saturn to move into our dimension. So think of the dimensional barrier, that energy barrier that you're going to quantum tunnel through, that barrier existing physically between the Earth and Saturn. But the entities that are in Saturn reside in a different dimensional state. Because they're in a different dimensional state, we have to open an interdimensional portal for them to physically travel from Saturn through that portal. And as they move from Saturn to the opening of the portal, they're moving from their dimension into our dimension. Think of it in this way. They're operating in a different timeline at Saturn. When they come to Earth, they're in our timeline. Now, that's just so that people have a way to reference one dimension to another. And the reason why they have to have a gateway, a portal, to allow them to come here to move along those Birkeland currents that we've talked about, that actual conduit that will extend from the Earth to Saturn. But they have to have that portal open so they can change them from their time frame, their dimension, into our time frame, our dimension, as they move from one planet to the other.
So the quantum computer is basically, to me, it's a sky computer. It can go in any direction at once. It's very powerful. How does it work as far as the entities? What are they like when they would come through? I mean, how do they communicate with them? Are they like technical energy?
Yeah, we're talking digital signals. The entities themselves, I do believe, have a physical form. If we're talking about entities, and from our Christian standpoint, when we look at things through the lens of Christianity and biblical scripture, our relationship with Jesus Christ, these entities in the other dimension, which we are forbidden to contact in any manner,
Right.
to have any interactions with, they are physical entities. They are also spiritual. Here's a little bit of a diversion, a little footnote. There is a thing in quantum physics that is known as the particle duality, or the theory of duality, meaning that a particle can also be an energy wave, and an energy wave can also be a particle. The critical thing to understand is that they are both an energy wave and a particle simultaneously. The fact that you have the theory of duality, you can apply that to our discussion now of who's on the other side of this barrier, because they are both an energy wave, which is a spirit, and they are also a physical form, which is a particle at the same time. Now, for people that are not familiar with physics, that may be hard to understand in a practical sense. But if you'll just accept the notion that something can be both spiritual and physical at the same time, both a wave and a particle at the same time, then you're going to be able to understand what I'm about to talk about in terms of what's on the other side and how is it going to move into our realm of existence. The quantum tunneling we sort of talked about as far as going through the base of the pyramid, and we were talking about the adiabatic quantum computer and how it does that. Well, the same thing happens at CERN with the LHC. What they're going to do is to use strangelets to break what's called the strong force. The strong force is one of the elementary forces of the universe. There's also the weak force, but we're talking about strong force that binds at the quantum level nuclear particles. This is a nuclear force that joins particles. It takes a tremendous amount of power to break that nuclear strong force. Now, we're not talking about splitting atoms like you think of when people talk about, the atom bomb, which really isn't splitting atoms. But without getting into talking about atom bombs, we're talking about tearing the veil So when the power that's generated by collisions by the Large Hadron Collider, they keep seeking higher and higher powers. They need to get to a threshold point. They had a threshold point of 10 tera-electron volts to create strangelets. They have a threshold point to open the veil, to break that nuclear bond. They're going to break that nuclear bond using an explosive, using strangelets. But that power level is not in tera-electron volts. That's just for the particle collisions. They literally are going to set off, let's call it a nuclear device, but on a grander scale. They're actually going to use the strangelets as an explosive to break the nuclear bond at the quantum level. So picture something really small, two particles side by side, joined by a nuclear force. You then cut through that nuclear bond. You cut it like a string. When you do that and you separate these particles that are held together, that's opening up a dimensional portal. That's distorting time. If we're to look at Einstein for a guidepost of the distortion of time or time and how it relates to our frame of reference, our universe here in this dimension, there's a rip in time that takes place when you separate those particles. That rip in time is allowing you to enter into a different timeline. That different timeline is that other dimension. We use time as a measurement tool because our brains are so limited by design that the only way we can really understand dimensions is by using a measurement tool like a yardstick that we call time. Time is linear, it's a straight line. So if we use time as a way to represent another dimension, we are entering that dimension by distorting time, and the distortion is caused by the separation of nuclear particles when you break that strong force. You need an explosive to break that strong force. They have the explosive, they have the strangelets in sufficient quantities, and we call it throwing the switch, but they don't really need to fire up the particle collider in the sense of using it as a collider anymore. They're using it to propel the strangelets and then be able to explode those strangelets at the same time that they're creating this connection between Saturn that we described using the Birkeland currents. So this explosion will travel across the Birkeland current conduit, the plasma conduit. It'll tear a hole in the fabric of space between Earth and Saturn, and it will allow those entities that are in a different timeline in Saturn to pass through that fabric in space and enter into our timeline.
How does the plasma envelope work with that?
That's an after effect. If we're looking at the timeline of the portal connecting to Saturn and then the entities moving through, and the portal is closed. Again, we said it's only going to be a matter of minutes that it's open to allow digital entities, digital signals, those particle wave dualities to come through into our timeline. Then the portal closes, and then after that is when the plasma envelope that used to envelop both Saturn and Earth when they were together during the Golden Age, that plasma envelope will be ignited around Saturn, but more importantly, it'll be ignited around Earth, and that's why we're seeing the chemtrail spraying. That's why we're seeing the terraforming of the planet that is initiated by the Large Hadron Collider's magnets and synchrotron energies, which are gamma rays. All of these things are contributing towards taking the plasma that exists in the entire universe, the electric ionized gas, which is in the form of a plasma state, will be ignited by this explosion after the portal is opened and then closes, and the after effect is the envelope of plasma that does surround the planet will be, as I call it, igniting. There's a more scientific way of describing that, but it's energizing the plasma in an excited state, and that envelops the planet because of the strangelet explosion that takes place between Saturn and the Earth. You're igniting both envelopes that already exist around the two planets, but you're energizing those two to create the state or the status of the plasma that used to according to their storyline, that used to envelop the two planets. They're trying to recreate that level of plasma excitation that existed in their theoretical golden age. Picture the environment, the atmosphere, if you will, that we have right now that supports our form of life. As you and I have discussed in the past, and even as announced by Lady Gaga, that ridiculous, person, that, in the video I put out about a week ago, in which we have a clip of Gaga on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno a few years back saying, we're going to birth a new race of beings, and she comes out of the egg. We discussed that at length. The point is they do believe that they are going to birth a new race of beings, and that new race of beings has to have its own unique environment. And that environment is what the plasma envelope provides. And that is the environment that they believe existed during the golden age of Kronos. They believe that they're recreating life forms, humans, in the way that they existed during the golden age. Now, understand, this golden age really never existed, but this is their belief system that I'm just passing on. And so the plasma envelope serves that purpose of being a new atmosphere, a new environment that coincides with the terraforming of the planet that's going on right now with the earthquakes and volcanoes and the changes in weather, changes in the magnetosphere. It goes on and on and on. It's active terraforming that's going on right now. And once the portal is achieved, then they have to have the environment for this new race of beings that are coming through the portal.
It falls into Project Bluebeam, which the first stage is massive earthquakes.
Right, yeah, and the projection of holograms all around the planet.
Which they have the ability to do, and we know that they have the ability to make a human being, like a form of a human flesh, stand and talk right in front of us. And it could be a hologram, but to us it would be very real. They've had that capability for a very long time.
Well, let's go back again to Lady Gaga, because this is all predictive programming coming through for the purpose of getting the masses to accept the grand deception that's coming. And the grand deception is, our benevolent ancestors from the stars have returned to solve all of the world's problems. Well, they're going to use Project Bluebeam and holograms to do that. I did sort of a tongue-in-cheek video about Lady Gaga that perhaps at the Super Bowls she would appear as a hologram. Well, that didn't happen, but that was based upon her release prior to the Super Bowl of herself as a hologram in a commercial sponsored by Intel for the Grammy. She is presented as a hologram. And I was joking in a video about maybe she'll show up at the Super Bowl as a hologram. Well, just a couple of days ago, since the Super Bowl, People magazine put out an article saying the 6 people that we would like to see come back as holograms at the Grammys. They're perhaps either watched my video and decided to write, an article and say, yeah, hey, Lady Gaga, well, why not all these other 6 famous people that could come back as a hologram at the Grammys? I don't think they saw my video. I think it's synchronicity playing out. I'm thinking that for predictive programming purposes, to get the masses to accept holograms as something that's good, they're going to present Michael Jackson and some of these other past pop stars that have since deceased. They're going to be resurrected as holograms at the Grammys. We'll have to see what happens. This is getting people ready for the grand deception of Bluebeam and holograms, holographic images of Jesus Christ, of Buddha, whoever, that they're going to present all around the planet. And these strange sounds that people have been hearing for the last couple of years that are produced by telluric currents generated by the LHC and other colliders, these strange sounds will be used along with these holographic images in the atmosphere. I need to emphasize that there are images that will be projected in the atmosphere, on the chemtrail sprayed atmosphere. That's one of the reasons that chemtrails have been sprayed, is to create a projection system for these holograms.
Project Bluebeam is very real. Serge Monast, who was a reporter, his children were kidnapped from him for telling the story about Project Bluebeam, but he still wrote the story and got it out there. And there was another reporter around the same time that he knew writing about these things, and they both were killed. This guy lost his family and he still wrote the story. He broke down how Project Blue Beam was going to occur. And the first thing that was going to happen was we were going to see a lot of catastrophic events. We were going to see a lot of very big earthquakes, sinkholes, in which we see a lot of sinkholes, a lot more earthquakes than we've ever seen. And we know that there's one coming in California that's due to come. It's already due now to come on a massive scale to be the biggest earthquake ever. And so that's just part of that. See, people can't wrap their heads around these things, that they do have the capability with these satellites to do a lot more than what they could ever imagine. In China, they made a whole city appear, a whole city, the ocean.
That's right.
It was on the news in China. And so they have this ability to make anything appear that they want to. And they will use this for more psychological warfare, I think, in the end times. I think it's a part of the United Nations plan. I think that this is all going to play in to the New World Order, and it's going to be used for their benefit, for war and everything else.
Yeah, definitely. And this grand deception that's coming out, let's talk about Hillary Clinton. She said that if she is elected president, one of the first things she's going to do is go to Area 51, and she's going to get to the bottom of this whole UFO thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that in our last video.
Oh, they're going to say that these entities that came through the portal are the benevolent ancestors, and that they have their UFO spaceship. And again, that's going to be holograms. They're going to say that, they've traveled here through a dimensional portal. The LHC was successful, that if we just do what we're being told to do, because these are the answers to solve all the problems, then you can have your new world order, you can have your one world leader and your one world religion, because our ancestors are saying that we need to do this to save ourselves from ourselves. And that's the grand deception.
They're going to want everyone to believe a lie. People will want to believe, when there's a catastrophic event. I said before, with the $100 bill, having the nuke going in New York City, people not being able to buy food without the mark of the beast, without the new system in place with the new trade. People are going to want technology. They're going to want everything to get back to normal again. And this is going to be their new peace and their new plan for the world. That, like we said before, this is what they're going to come against, the people that are awake, like we're crazy. Like we don't know what we're doing and we don't know what we're talking about because we don't want to follow this system.
That's right. We're being perceived as the enemy because if we don't walk lockstep with all the other sheep, if we don't do what we're told, then we are the enemy. And we follow Christ. We don't follow Lucifer. Therefore, we're in the wrong camp according to the world, and we need to be done away with.
That's the thing about psychological warfare and mind control. People are taught to believe that through television, through world systems, and everything that they're listening to. They're in tune and plugged into the world. They don't see the new world order that's coming about in this one world system, and they will follow like sheep to the slaughter. That's their choice, but that's why we're here, to pray for them, to get the message out, and hopefully they'll follow Christ and do what Christ says. I read a verse earlier that said that he has hidden manna for those that follow him. He can do anything for us. He promises that we won't be without food or clothing, shelter, anything that we need. He's going to provide everything that we need.
Yes,
so no
indeed.
matter what happens, even though whatever we may go through, we're going to be rewarded in heaven. And I'm going to see you there. I'm going to see Tim there.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to have a good old time. And it's going to be a glorious thing. And we're going to be happy. There's going to be no more judgment and no more pain, no sadness. Everything is going to be better than what we can even imagine.
Yeah, to dispel the fear is where you're going with that. And I wholeheartedly agree. We should spend more time, I'm saying people in general, we should spend more time focused on the light, focused on the love of Jesus Christ, and not so much on being fearful of a already defeated foe who's trying to trick us. It's easy for us to get caught up in studying the physics and studying the occult and studying the ancients, the popular culture, and say, wow, look at all these dangerous things. Look at all this horrible activity that's going on. I want to share with people that behind all of that, Chris and Tim and myself, we are focused on our relationship with Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. That's where our minds dwell. We dwell on things above. We dwell on things that are not of this earth. And yet we have a mission to carry forward and show to people the nefarious things that are going on so that they will not be tricked, that they will not be lied to, that they will not be deceived. That's our purpose. It's not to scare people. The thing is to understand and to believe that God is in control. And going with God, going with Jesus Christ, gives you that peace of mind and gives you that courage and that lack of fear to do whatever it is that He's called you to do. This is my calling. This is Chris and Tim's calling. We're just responding to that calling. That's as simple as that.
God didn't give us a spirit of fear. He's actually way more powerful than anything Cern can do. He is way more powerful than any of the fallen angels or entities or anything like that. And Jesus already won. And the Bible says that. He said it is finished. It's just about waking up. It's about getting closer to Jesus, being ready and prepared, and also doing whatever He's called you to do. If it's just to help out one person or pray for one person, even just praying for us, for what we do. I know Anthony's been out on a limb a lot of times, and he's gone out there because of his faith and because of what God has told him to do and called him to do. Prayers are everything, and covering us in the blood of Jesus and our shows and what we do to get the truth out there, because there's so much disinformation out there. There's a lot of people out there that don't see the truth, that are asleep. I mean, I at one time was asleep, and I did ministry, I did evangelism. I was really into the Word, and I had no idea, because I guess God allowed me to wake up whenever He was ready for me to, but I surely know that He trained me for it. He
Yeah,
prepared
definitely.
me for it.
Yeah, and it reflects in the incredible connections that you make and understanding genealogies and the family connections and all of these gods and sub-gods. And you have a genius for the area of study that you're in. And He has blended us together in a three-way. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
In a three-way team. You guys really are the ones that brought me out into the public. I mean, I'd been doing all this research and stuff in a vacuum, and you contacted me, and I know that that was because it was the Lord's timing, and it was His moving of you to contact me a year ago. That's what really started this whole snowball of you guys with End Times Matrix News and me with my stuff. We haven't gotten together as much as we've wanted to because both of us have been overtaken with all of the things that we've had to do in terms of reaching out to other audiences and get the word spread. And so finally we're coming back together. And I think it's because, and here's the title of that infamous book, but it's the coalescing of events and things that are coming together, the popular culture coming together, the activities in the Middle East with the Saudis coming with 350,000 troops to the Syrian border now. We've got the economic, the political, the scientific. We have all these things that are pulling together into a nexus, into a hub at the same time. So I think the Lord is making the time for you and me and Tim to get back together and have these conversations, because that's where it all started, was the three of us a year ago talking and sharing our respective missions and our callings with the audience.
Things are getting closer and closer. Look at what CERN has accomplished. Look at what Obama's done and all the executive orders and the trade agreement, gun control. All of these things are coming into play. And we put all these things together. We put the ancients together. You put the physics together. When we put those things together, we understand that CERN is based on alchemy and the Ogot. It is an alchemy machine, and it is tied to the planets. And the planets are tied to the fallen angels. Just to put those things together, to understand that knowledge, and for God to show us the truth, like He said in the end times, a lot of things are going to be revealed. Knowledge is going to increase. And it must increase because the occult is letting out a lot of their knowledge and they're tricking people into believing it for the New World Order so they can make people as slaves. And as I call Nimrod, the soul hunter, that's what he is. And the Antichrist is the soul hunter. And that's what he wants, is he wants to be God and he wants as many as souls as he can take down with him. But he didn't win. And so those who take the mark of the beast, they will not die. They will suffer for a period of time before they are cast wherever God is going to cast them. The angels are going to pour out their bowls and they're going to get sores all over their face. The fifth trumpet is when the abyss is going to open. The sixth trumpet's going to sound and the angels of the Euphrates rivers is going to be released, and the Euphrates River is right there where Syria is. Those two rivers have a lot to do with everything, with the Garden of Eden, with trade, with Mesopotamia. That's why they're having war there. That is why all this chaos is happening and all this stirring up. It's no coincidence that all of this is happening why CERN is ready to push the button.
Well, I have said in the past that it's somewhat like the magician who uses one hand to distract while the trick is being done by the other. I think that the timing is going to be a flipping of the switch with CERN for this portal scenario that will coincide with Damascus ceasing to exist. And as Jonathan Kleck has said, and I like Jonathan Kleck, I like his gift, when the nukes come down, we go up. Well, if it's the nukes that fall on Damascus, then that would be perhaps the time of the rapture. Now, again, I understand we are not to know. I'm not putting a date to anything, but we do know the season. Yeah. We are given that to know the season. And it does appear that we're very close to seeing Damascus. It's already a ruinous heap. Putin had said a couple of days ago they're conducting what they call an exercise. Well, it's the largest exercise that has ever been put together in military history, including World War II. And we're talking about an exercise, not a battle.
Wow.
But 350,000 troops, 2,480 tanks, it goes on and on. But Putin has said, if you guys bring these forces to the Syrian border, I will use tactical nuclear warheads as a first strike option against this overwhelming massive force, larger than the forces that Russia has presently in Syria. He knows that in order to prevent being overrun, he has to use tactical nukes. Well, that fits right into this whole thing of Damascus disappearing overnight.
Yeah.
So we may be that close. I'm not saying we are. I'm just saying we may. There's truce talks and ceasefire talks going on, and maybe it'll play out that they'll finally back away from the precipice, and we'll have another extension of time. It's extraordinary to look at this taking place right now.
It is. We have what the Bible says about the Euphrates River dried up. It's already dried up. The red heifer is already born. The third temple is already ready. We got the peace talks going on. We're there. We're right there.
We are, and I don't think we're going to be here to see the flipping of the switch with CERN. I don't think we're meant to be here when that happens, because this is a tool of judgment. That's why this is being allowed to progress like this. It's a tool of judgment. It is a tool of wrath for the last 3.5 years, which is the Great Tribulation. Now, we may be in the tribulation now, the first 3.5. I don't know. I don't need to know. I only need to know what I'm being led by the Lord to understand. Going back to my magician's thing, I think that when Damascus is hit, that's when CERN is activated. One hand versus the other hand. So the distraction is the Middle East, while the real game is at CERN, Geneva, Switzerland.
Wow.
I'm not saying I know. I certainly never have set myself up to be a prophet, and I'm not one now. I'm just kind of looking at it and saying, it wouldn't surprise me if it played out that way, but we're just going to have to watch. We're just observers, really, at this point. If the Lord cares to share more insights and revelations with us, then that's what he wants us to do. We'll pass them along. I want to thank people that do pray for us and people that do the intercessory prayer for us and cover us with the full armor of God through prayer. I get a lot of emails from people that are supportive. I get a lot of comments to videos that are supportive, and I focus on the supportive ones and the positive ones. And I thank everybody out there that does pray for us, because that's what keeps us safe. That's what keeps us going. And to hear your emails and your comments, so to speak, reading them, I should say, does buoy us up and push us along and keep us encouraged and keep us strong and keep us doing this, because it would be very easy for the three of us, including Tim in this, to just close the computer and walk away and not do this anymore. But we know that this is what God has put on our hearts to do. So your prayers help us.
Yeah, so we do appreciate those prayers very much. Well, thanks,
Yep.
Anthony, for joining me today on this topic of tearing the veil and explaining all these things to us and helping us to understand CERN on a level that we can understand. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're my good friend. I love talking with you.
And you are too. I'm so happy that God brought us together.
I am too. All right. Well, we'll talk again. Thank you. And God bless you, my friend.
You too.